I'm Bill Oughton of Oughton Claims Management.
I'm Chantal Roberts of CMR Consulting, and welcome to the Art of Adjusting podcast.
Today, we're going to talk about life as an insurance adjuster from the perspective of property, auto, liability, or workers' compensation adjusters. Our goal is to bring interesting topics in the world of claims adjusting to people who are working as an adjuster now and to people who are considering a career as a claims adjuster.
Hey, Chantal, how are you doing today?
Doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm extra excited because we've got Luis Diaz here today.
Yay.
And we're going to talk about Claim Mentor, his product, and artificial intelligence, and how fun it is to have our AI involved in our claims process. Hi, Luis. How are you today?
Doing good. Yeah, thank you for switching your going to a later time to accommodate my California need to sleep in. I would have jumped in at 6 a.m., but
You're way out in
Yeah.
California. It's noon here. What time is it there? About 4 a.m.
Yeah, that
With the
sounds
sun.
yeah.
Sun.
I'm in Hawaii. No, they've
Yeah.
no, it's just past 9, and yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, it's gorgeous day here in California. So
Great. Well, real quick, what is Claim Mentor? What is the two sentences on what Claim Mentor is?
yeah, it's a workbench to it helps with one part of the process. With claimant statements, we help with the scheduling and recording transcriptions and summary and saving it back into your claim system of record, like whether or not that's Claim Center or anything that you happen to do. So we're just focused on the importance of getting really good claimant statements for insured adjusters and offering AI to expedite that. So that's like great sentences. So
Yeah, I think that's like fascinating, Luis, because what was it, Bill? It was a couple months ago. We actually talked about recorded statements and how the process can be for adjusters, especially new ones. I want to say it's like 33 or something like that. It was back in
Episode
January.
number?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, episode number. I think it was back in January.
Yep.
And some of the issues with the recorded statement can be that adjusters just don't have the time because we're overworked and underpaid, of course. And so they don't become proficient in doing those recorded statements, or they're afraid to be yelled at, especially like the new ones, not so much the old hands, but they're afraid to be yelled at. So Luis, I understand that you actually interviewed about 30 adjusters to grasp what their challenges are. And what did they tell you?
So it's a great question. So just to talk a little bit about the interview process, like I didn't come into this thinking about claimant statements. What I did is uh, I just focused and had open-end discussions with adjusters initially, just saying like, hey, imagine the power of 1,000 interns, right? That could help you with your job. And where is it that you are just like having like wasted time? Like you want to be focusing on providing really good service and doing your job, but like what's frustrating to you? And what showed up in this particular area of the research, the same thing came up a lot in terms of like scheduling difficulty or just seeing like it's really archaic. Like one is like, okay, so after the FNOL, there's an expectation that I'm supposed to meet with someone. We play a lot of phone tag, right? And then we finally get someone, or if I discuss it with someone, they might be distracted at that point in time, right? So scheduling was difficult. And then the emotional side of it was from the adjusters is like, this could be very stressful for claimants, right? And it's not just about taking notes, it's about listening and providing good service and the importance of being able to do that. So if you're going ahead and you're doing a good statement, right, and you're trying to figure out what's happening, if someone is kind of distracted and just like being like just listening, just going through the motions and taking notes, right, you're not really engaged well with the claimant. So more experienced adjusters talk about how they'll spend a lot of time just like describing the process of what's happening and what's going on with the claim, right? And then they get into like, okay, let's get the statement, right? versus a more junior adjuster, right? That's getting a statement. It's like, okay, I'm expected to go through this and we're going to go through recorded items. So the idea is like, okay, what can we do to remove all the like just make it so people can engage and get and be human to human contact, right? And with that, like, okay, maybe we can help with the scheduling. And then when you're interviewing someone, you could just be present, right? And then afterwards, you don't have to worry as much about the transcriptions and summaries of what actually happened, because you could go back and you could look and you can listen and you can engage. So that was kind of what, it's a very simple thing. And that came up when I interviewed these adjusters. They're just like, this is a thing that's like, the metric that we heard is over and over. Like if you interview someone for an hour, you're probably spending like an equal amount of time after, if not more, just like writing out your notes, describing it, and things are lost. So inaccuracy, right? Like it's just like you're interviewing someone, and then we live in an age of distraction, right? So things get distracted, and more of desktop adjusters are doing this job from home, right? That's the other part of this, like especially post-pandemic, right? Like people are not working out of offices anymore. Most adjusters, like desktop adjusters, they have completely remote teams. So we all know that when you work from home, you could get a doorbell that comes in, or like my dog will bark during the day because like she's just like trying to engage with the postal worker, right? So that's kind of it, and that's kind of where like I get an idea in my head. I was like, okay, well, we can help with this problem. So that's kind of it. That's what I found out in the interviews. But there's several things that frustrate adjusters. This is just like one of them. So yeah.
I would agree. There are a lot of things that frustrate adjusters,
Yeah.
and the ability to contact people is a huge frustration, especially the ones that may be disinterested in the whole process. If it's an independent witness that really isn't involved in the claim, other than they saw it happen, they don't really care to take time out of their day to help you. So as an adjuster, you have to explain to them why it's important to get their statement, and you have to be able to kind of impart to them the importance of what's at stake. There's
Right.
a lot of, somebody got hurt really bad here. There's a lot of money at play here, and there's insurance protection, sure, but it could be a case that goes beyond policy limit, and we need your help here because the consequences could be real for some people if we don't get this right. So I think that will be the biggest challenge with AI. If AI is involved in the process of creating these appointments, reaching out to people in an automated fashion, and then just scheduling the appointment, there has to be a little more human touch to it, because whether it's like I said, an independent witness or a claimant or even an insured, sometimes insureds don't want to cooperate either because they
Yeah.
feel like they're getting blamed, and they don't want to talk about a mistake that they may have made, or they may be really defensive about it, or they may be scared. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's an option. Like part of it is the okay, so the most of the time you're calling someone up and you're saying you leave a message and they get back to you, right? And then you try to engage and you talk to them. Most people are on their now or on their they have their cell phone, they have their smartphones with them, right? So it's an option that like the adjuster is always in the loop, being like, hey, do you want to just send out an opportunity to see if they want to get a text message to sign up for some time and see your calendar? So it's opposed to the I any time in which someone is like reluctant or kind of to get back to the insurance company, the automatic scheduling might not be a fit, but times in which people are just like, if you turn it to be, here's my availability, me the adjuster, right? And what, do these times work for you, right? And then the other side is like, why didn't you just tell us what works for you and what doesn't, claimant? And they're like, well, don't ever try to get me on Fridays, and like during like from like 8 to 10 a.m. I'm just doing like drop-offs of the kids. So none of that time works, and that's just like information. But yeah, I mean, it's
The automated calendar invites that
yeah,
we use by text message or email are great because they can respond at 2 o'clock in the morning if they want it and pick the day and time that works for them.
right.
I hope they don't, it won't let them schedule a statement at 2 o'clock in the morning, but
Right.
it will allow them to schedule it for the next day during business hours. So that's very helpful. And I think what you have is something along those lines as well, correct?
Yeah, it's the whole thing from setting the initial meeting to what if there's a change on their side, right? They're like, oh my God, can I move this like an hour, right? You know, I know I said I'd be available at 10, but something popped up, and can I reschedule it, you know, on that side, and the reason. And on the other side for the adjuster too, when we just started talking about adjusters leaving their calendars like available for people to get back to them. Adjusters are used to, you know, driving their own schedule, right?
Mhm.
And so if you're flipping it around to being like, we're available, you're making yourself available at different times, then the adjuster wants to talk about like, well, when's the best time for me to be able to take interviews? And secondly, how many of these statements can I do in a day? Like, it's like realistically, you don't sign me up for like, you know, if, you know, like William, like what if you knew that you had back to back like 8 claimant statements on one day? That'd be
Yeah,
pretty,
we can manage that through our system because it will create buffer zones
right.
before and after. And then there's some appointments that require a lot of travel. So we'll have to, I know if I got to travel 2 hours to a destination, I need to block off before and after so that nobody sneaks in an appointment during those times. And sometimes I have to pull over on the side of the road and take a statement over the phone. At a truck stop or something. I just did that Monday, actually. So that happens too. It's a matter of being creative with your time, really, and
Yeah.
knowing how to shoulder the burden, I guess, when you have a big caseload.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell me about automated transcription and how that helps the claims process.
Yeah. Well, to back up like one thing, like just so audited to answer your question directly, it's just you probably see it today. If you're using Zoom, there is all calls on Zoom. You could go back and you see the video and you see the transcription, right? Um, the quality of that transcription is dictated by how well a model is trained, right? So a general Zoom transcription wouldn't be able to pick up on insurance specific terms, right? And and you probably do this quite a bit on when you go back to your notes through this. If you're talking, Chantal and you are talking about insurance, you're starting to, really geek out and go deep, right? You're just like, it doesn't know what it means by like SIU and FNOL and like all the different insurance specific terms, right? So, but to answer it, it just after the recording, it transcribes. And then the importance is what happens after that is like the summarization of like what were the interesting parts of the conversation that happened. And that quality is also driven by how well a model understands what you're trying to do, right? And those models can be trained specifically on the processes or that an insurance company actually has, right? Being like, what were the goals that you're actually trying to get out of your statement, right? And what type of information were you trying to gather? Versus like if you don't train your summarization model, it's just going to be like, okay, is this like a one-on-one discussion? Was this like a sales pitch? You're like, no, this is an insurance statement interview. So yeah, transcription is just like transcribing what happened and having it as specific as possible, and then so it's precise. And then summary is like just what occurred and what was interesting that happened. So
I
those are
would be interested to see the differences between the prompts or the model that's being used if a claimant's attorney was evaluating a transcript versus an adjuster or a defense attorney was analyzing that same transcript. I think you would get two very different views of the story if you were to tailor those models according to their particular interests. And
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's a
because
little disturbing too, because we talk a lot about confirmation bias. It's
mm,
so prevalent on both sides of the aisle here. You
Yes.
talk to some attorneys and they they see that it's a slip and fall, or they're basing their version of events on everything they were told by one person, their claimant.
Yeah.
They didn't get the other the other people's side yet. And we may have the benefit of having security camera video that shows it happened in a completely different way. And with AI, I think there's potential opportunities to miss those boats in terms of
Absolutely.
opportunities either to help your case on the plaintiff side or to defend the case on the defendant side.
yeah, I can actually speak a little bit to that because Bill, you know that we talked about Colossus. I used to use Colossus when I was working at MetLife back in the day. And of course, Colossus was an AI, but what it was a program
Right.
where you put in all of the medical bills and records and it spit out, what was normal and quote unquote normal, what was quote unquote acceptable, yada, yada, yada. And there was a huge mass lawsuit about that because plaintiff attorneys, policyholder attorneys felt that it could be bias. And because it's garbage in, garbage out, that kind of deal. And so I know that I definitely believe that artificial intelligence, AI, is never going to be able to replace a human. We had mentioned empathy earlier in the show, just very briefly when we were talking about it. So I don't think that AI is ever going to be able to replace the adjusters, the human adjusters, but I can see how it would be helpful to have something transcribe that, because if I had a penny for every time that someone said, I didn't say that, or you said yada yada yada, and I didn't really say that, it's beneficial to have. But I'm curious, we did mention, like older adjusters, not older, more senior adjusters versus junior adjusters versus brand
Seasoned.
new
Yeah.
uh,
Seasoned adjusters, right?
seasoned
Yeah.
adjusters,
Yeah.
spicy adjusters. So I wonder how they would look at this. Would they be like, I don't need any AI to help me because I can, and I know that I personally can. I have trained myself to listen and type
Right.
at the same time, so I don't have to wait and do another 30 minutes or whatever after my interview and type up what the notes are, because I'm doing it as it goes. I'm going along. But some of the newer adjusters are busy looking at what I ask, what my questions are, so I can't like talk. And then Bill and I have talked about a lot of times listening. You've got to listen to know what they're saying to ask the follow-up question, because the follow-up question may not be what's on the list. You may be
Right.
going off into right field instead of left field because you need to know which way the ball's going, so to speak. So I was wondering, when you were talking to adjusters, how are they, based on their just seasonedness, bland to
Yeah.
spicy,
I'll
like
talk to you.
Thai hot, Indian hot, kind of deal?
Yeah, well, that's funny. Well, first of all, like getting the interviews initially was when I came and approached it being like, hey, I'm taking things from like AI perspective to help you do your job. And I was getting friends and adjusters to try to get referrals. Okay, like Luis, a lot of people are coming back being like, why would I want to talk to someone that's trying to take my job? I'm like, whoa, hold on. Like, I'm like, that's not even what I'm discussing. Like, so for So sometimes I just have to go back with my background. Like I'm like, I've been doing claims automation software for like 20 years. I was an early employee of Guidewire Software. I was the head of product for Claim Center, right? And we've been talking about automation for years, years. Just AI and large language models in AI agents, which I'll discuss, is just the latest iteration of it. I mean, honestly, like there's particular tasks that will be able to be, so let's just address the fear first. Like, is it going to take my job? No.
Right.
Like for what we're focused on is like, what is the repetitive, what's the administrative stuff, free you up for higher level work, right?
It's going to take parts of your job.
It's going to take away the menial, but
The
there was,
day-to-day stuff, you know,
yeah, exactly. It won't take away like the stuff that you actually got your certifications on, right?
which is the actual adjusting.
Right.
But if you could have someone like pay attention and type up your notes, because for example, I'll give you another example. My GP, general practitioner, actually has, and there's a big word, it begins with an A, amnesis or something like that. Basically, it's another human being who comes in and takes the notes for him so that he can look at you or me while the other person, he's like, okay, code in a blah, 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 or, whatever. And they're like taking notes so that he can focus on the patient. And that's kind of the same thing that you're discussing. This AI agent, not a retail agent who's going to be selling insurance, which I'm like, why are we calling it an agent anyway?
I
So
will get to that. Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's 100% it. Like where, and there's other software providers that are taking a different approach than mine, right? Like the approach is being like, okay, for the first notice of loss process, how much money could you save if you weren't using call center representatives on that, but the initial intake of calls are going to be completely scripted by an agent that's going to sound like a human, right? That's not, and I think that is, well, I'll mention, let's talk about like when I used to talk about productivity for first notice of loss processes, right? One thing that VP of claims and everybody always discusses is like the two general processes of first notice of loss. One is it's just the speed. You get customer service reps in there that maybe don't even have a lot of knowledge on that side, and then they transfer that over to an adjuster later. Versus the other, which they call the take and retain, which is like, actually, what about if we actually had the experienced adjusters on that initial call, right? That could actually help and talk through the process of what actually is there. And then the person that you're talking to is actually going to be the person that's handling your claim, like concierge services, right? So,
hated that.
right,
I'm
when
sorry,
you're
hated that. I was like, oh, it's a new claim. Oh, I got to type it in. Oh,
Yeah, no, I know, but the thing is, from an insurance perspective, is like, do you want to have the people that really know the process talking to the claimants at the beginning? And so, if your approach is like it's, FNOLs is just a time suck, and we're just trying to like reduce that time as much as possible, then maybe they think like an AI like bot can do that. But and I could be wrong. I've been wrong a lot, but like I think it's the everything that we're doing is like, how is it that these AI bots, if you will, can just take away the repetition tasks and make things easier. And maybe, Chantal, if you were on that same process of the FNOL, if you knew that something was taking in the notes, or, let's talk about the future, right? Like right now, crawl, walk, run. What I'm stating is you have these recordings. Most insurance companies have recordings of all calls. And then what do they do with that call? What do they do with it? They save it off. It's a WAV file. They never use it, right? They use it maybe if they get sued, right? Some bad faith claim comes. So the first step is being like, okay, let's take the recording and let's transcribe it and summarize it and put it back into your claim system. So now you have better models that do data science to be, let's measure outcomes between who are the good adjusters that are taking statements and how does that reflect in outcomes in terms of payouts of claims. And you could, because right now, the only data you have is that it's what the adjusters listening put into a field called notes, right? And so that's step one. Step two is like, as I was saying, is now you could use, supervisors can use that data, or you were talking about the seasoned adjusters. I love this one. They're like, I don't want them to record this. I do this great. I'm like, yeah, but what if you got a claim file that was transferred to you? Like, what are the notes of like another adjuster? Like, oh my God, sometimes I just need to start over, right? They're like, I need to start over, and I might need to just call the claimant again and be like, so increasing and removing errors. But like the future state of this is, okay, based upon the type of claim that comes in and what guidance we want to give to someone, what if we could just go, while you're talking to someone, the bot just goes ahead and says, hey, make sure to capture this part of the information. You haven't gotten enough information in terms of the lost location. Like, did you get the actual date and time? So the idea is to kind of prompt and help people so they can stay engaged in the conversation. So that's kind of like the steps to keep it super simple is, right now, insurance companies have this data-rich information untapped of audio statements, and those audio statements are not put back into the claim system. Step two is use that data to if it's in your claim system, then you can put it into your reporting, you can run it into your analytics, and you can actually measure outcomes. And step three is, let's go ahead and train these systems to help people do their job better. So you get, that's our aspirational. That's why I call it claim mentor, right? Is how do you get a more junior adjuster to be almost, try to get them as effective as a senior adjuster, right? So hopefully, I'm sorry for the monologue, but I get passionate, and that's kind of like, that's how I think about it.
So just to clarify on recorded statements, I'll just give you kind of a snapshot of what they mean in my world. They're, when we're requested to obtain one, we carry it out much like a mini deposition. I mean, it's a very formal beginning and ending. It is recorded, it is transcribed, and then that transcription, for most of our clients, I would say 90% of them want the transcribed version with our report, so they can read through it all.
Yep.
Only one of them, maybe two, will routinely ask just for the audio. They don't want the transcription. I don't know why. It seems weird not to have the transcription to me. My whole career, you have to remember that when I started out, we were taking handwritten statements, which I still do today, depending on the circumstances. So having that stuff as written documents has always been the norm. But now what you're proposing, I think, is more than just recorded statements. It's also applicable to every phone conversation that you would have with someone, because in the background that's being recorded and transcribed and being made potentially part of that claim file. And that can then shape more of the claim file than a normal human would be capable of, given the workload that we have to face as adjusters. There's likely something that's going to be missed along the way. And if that's all captured and integrated into some sort of data set within the claim file, then you can index that information with AI.
Very insightful. Like, to let you know where I started with my journey of this entire investigation, actually, the interviews I was doing, I started with SIU, right? I special investigation units, right, that do calls that are trying to find out because something is maybe not right on a particular, on a file, like something is suspicious, right? So step one, like what I thought would have been possible was, I was like, okay, what we're going to use is we're going to use the power of AI for fraud detection. And what we're going to do is we're going to take, like, imagine if you had 5 different claimant statements on a claim file, and you could go ahead and you could detect for conflicting statements of what people said, right? And then also on top of that, like, wouldn't it be great if we could go ahead and do sentiment analysis where we can actually pick up on people's emotional inflections of what's happening and see if people are like telling the truth, right? And and then of course I go ahead and I do the interviews. I get really excited for like this future sci-fi version of what I want to do. And they're like, "Oh my God, are you going to help us actually record and get claimant statements?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "Well, we don't get them. Like we don't have any of these recordings, right?" So that's why I turned around and I was like, "Oh my God, like I'm like thinking about like, 2040 functionality of doing this analysis, but like step one is get the data, right?" Um,
Interesting.
but
I
there's
believe that too, is with some of the larger organizations,
right,
I could see where they have the system set up, but they haven't gone the full route with it. Yeah, they
right.
got the recording somewhere, but nobody really knows how to access them. Um, I think that's what you're talking
Yeah,
about, correct?
well, yes, and let's talk about why. Like, it comes back to this word again, fear. What are insurance organizations optimized for? They're worried they're worried about bad faith claims, right? They fear that if you capture, like, so you said, like, some people were like, just send us the audio, don't send us the transcript. They're worried about discoverability, right? They're worried about discoverability if something were to happen on the claim, right? And then a lawyer says, "I want to get all your information that you have on the claim file, all your recordings, all your transcriptions that happen, and then I'm going to use that against you in court," right? And
It's six of one, half dozen of the other. I mean, if you don't have the data, you're not going to make good decisions. If you do have it, you're going to be in a better position to know if you're sunk here, and time to get the checkbook out and limit your losses.
that's exactly what. So what I always say, this I work against fear is being like, what do you think? Do you think like what percentage of bad faith claims are there? I believe in insurance organizations, and I believe that by and large, insurance organizations, specifically PNC, are on the side of good, and they're just trying to put people back in the same, put them in a better, put them in the same position that they were before the claim, right? And but we have systems that are in place that are following old processes that are based on fear that are saying, keep it to a minimum in terms of what you're capturing on the notes, just the facts. But they are recording the calls, right? So that's kind of it. That's why. So you asked me, Chantel, about what's coming up with in my interviews, and by the way, you mentioned things that we haven't even touched on. It's fear, right? Fear of losing jobs, fear of discoverability. There is bias. There is a real concern when you're talking about artificial intelligence in terms of bias, and bias is determined by how you train your models and the information that you gather. And bias is also built into that certain facts and certain demographics can be, well, discriminatory. And
Yes.
then the other third is like what you're talking about is hallucinations, right?
What are they
Hallucinations.
taking? Because maybe we want some.
Yeah, exactly.
I
Yeah,
mean, I'm just going to say.
yeah, exactly. Like, let's give me the good stuff, right?
Exactly. Right? Am I right? I mean, adjusting is hard. Maybe we
Yeah,
need some good
absolutely.
stuff. I'm
Hey,
just
well, in California, there's whole cities that that will help you with that. It's totally legal, but
right. All I'm saying is instead of mama's little helper of being Jenna and tonics, we've got, the adjuster little helper.
absolutely. That's that's like it's funny because I love that you called it out because what we've applied is a human term, right, of a hallucination. And here's what's interesting about AI. The whole thing is a hallucination. Like the reason why it's recording and summarizing, it's not a symptom, it's the actual, it's how it works, right? all it's doing is it's got these models, it has all the data that it can, and then it doesn't know why it's producing the answers and the summaries that it does. It's just been trained in terms of saying, okay, what's the next expected word? What's, how have other people written this paragraph? It's not aware, right? That's the future of AI, is it's like it actually knows why it's doing what it's doing.
It's
But
See,
very
that
agreeable, I've noticed.
oh yeah.
It will work very hard to confirm whatever you're trying to get at.
yes, it does
Uh,
that. And
yeah,
we have talked with Sean Griffin, and I have talked with Sean Griffin previously. Bill, this is in the cyber podcast that we had, and
right.
that was just a couple months ago, I think. But I fear the robots rising up and killing us all, and probably because I've also been watching or rewatching Battlestar Galactica with my husband.
I love Battlestar Galactica. Oh my
And
God.
it's
Yeah,
it's
the
like it's back
Cylons
on
become
Prime or something, the reboot. Yeah. So naturally, I'm like, I'm really fearing the robots coming, although I desperately want a robot to start cooking and cleaning for me. So anyway, why don't you get on that, Luis?
yeah,
I would love that. That would be great. Um yeah. So here's something that I think about, and I wonder about this, and you may, of course, have a answer, or it may just be a total curveball that I'm throwing you here. Is certain states say that you have to declare and you have to have both people's permission. I think California is one of them, where you have
Right.
to have both parties' permission to record that, phone call or whatever, and then in some states like Arkansas, it just has to be one person. And the recorder, the person doing the recording, can do that. So, curveball, we haven't talked about this at all, but how do you get around that? Is that little voice thing that everybody hears, like this call may be recorded for audio purposes, and as we spack around our adjusters because they're not doing their jobs, or, whatever.
yes,
Mm.
yes. That's early and often, and just optimize. Our approach is going to be always lean towards telling people what's happening during the call, that it's being recorded, and before the call, when you're scheduling that, and they receive that text and they go ahead, they're like, this is what the meeting's going to be about, and it's going to be recorded, right? So it's so that's how we handle it, is just like is give people full information that it's going to be recorded, and that side. So tell them before, tell them during, tell them right before the meeting, and tell them during. You can see that it's recording. So, yep. That's a great question. Um, I just love that you love Battlestar
I'm
Galactica.
just saying, it's, yeah, the robots are gonna kill us. But what we talked about, one of the things I do want to go back to, and I think Bill actually brought this up. So Bill, you may want to expand on it or whatever. We were talking about the fact that now we can listen, and Bill and I have talked quite a bit about how to be a good adjuster, and that is listening. Because if you're like focusing on what your next question is going to be, then you're not listening. And more times than not, I've heard something and I went, huh, I need to go that way instead of, this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, during a statement that happens multiple times, and it's funny because the younger adjusters will have a statement guide. They will try and stay focused on that guide, and it could hijack an opportunity that you might have to go a different direction if you need to. So yes, it's important to listen. You have to have two sides of your brain going. You have to also be formulating questions, or at least addressing issues as they come up as you're listening. Listening as a practice in empathy is important. And you should learn to do that even during your statement, but you should also be listening so that you do know what the next question is going to be. The old rule is 2 ears, 1 mouth, and listen more than you speak. But you don't need to speak a lot when you ask the next question. Sometimes a simple why is all you need to say, and that will take it in another direction. But to ignore your question machine in your head while you're taking a statement is a huge mistake, because you're not going to get the information that's really going to help push the thing forward. And I try and teach adjusters to focus on not being succinct, or allowing the interviewee to be succinct with their answers. Dig a little deeper, ask more questions. Sometimes you get quiet people, they don't want to talk for whatever reason. They're just being difficult or cranky or shy, and you have to kind of pull the answers out of them. So listening is important while you're taking a statement, but you're listening so that you understand the details better, so that you can ask the right follow-up questions. And you're reading from your list at the same time. So it can be a challenge. And AI, I could see an AI bot happening during the phone conversation, and training it to be asking other questions as you go through it. That would be next level. I think that would be a hugely important tool for adjusters, to be able to have that AI thing listening in the background and transcribing and interjecting with questions. Hey, they just said they had red shoes when 5 minutes ago they were wearing white shoes, or some that kind of thing. I think would be important, and I'm sure AI is capable of doing it. I don't know how to make it happen, but you do probably.
That's it's I know a good amount, but I'm always still perpetual learner. There's one thing so there's a technical, and then there's the emotional side of listening. So one thing that happens immediately is, after your transcriptions and summaries, is a metric that says, what percentage of time did you spend talking on your meeting? Like, who of all the calls that happen, let's say it's like 2 people, how much time did you spend talking versus how much time did they spend talking, right? Good metric. In this age of distraction, anybody that takes the time just to put their life aside for a second and just make whoever they're talking to the most important person, right, at that moment, it builds builds trust, and with trust comes vulnerability, right? And with vulnerability, people will just openly discuss what happens, and that's it, right? So
Yes. Yeah, no, I was just going to jump right on in and say you are absolutely correct. And it's one of the things that I get so passionate about. You don't need to apologize for being passionate, because Bill and I will go off on a tangent all the time. But one of the things that I get passionate about when I'm teaching in the classroom about claims and insurance and whatever is, we're not taking care of our customers, our policyholders, or our claimants, third-party claimants, who would end up suing our insureds, and they get nervous, because Bill and I have talked about how the insureds aren't used to being sued a lot of times, and that freaks them out. And so if we're actually listening to them, people feel heard and they don't get angry. In fact, again, I'm going to reference another podcast that we've done where we talked about how to diffuse a situation, and I just shut up and I just let them go. And the answer, when they go, or when they stop, I'll go, and what else? And they go again, and you just go, and what else? And then by the 5th time, you're down to that nugget of what they're angry about or whatever. And I can see how this tool, and this is a tool.
that's right.
It's like anything. You can use it for good, you can use it for bad. Think about a broken egg. I mean, I can use a whisk, I can use a fork, I can put the whole egg into the skillet and use a spatula to make a scrambled egg. However, I mean, there's 3 tools right there.
Right.
But it's a tool. That's all it is. Like I said, I don't think it'll ever do that, but it can help us do our job better, which improves customer satisfaction.
Yes. I've Well, there's a mentor of mine, Jim Kaufman. He was the VP of claims for California Casualty for over 10 years. We worked together starting like in 2007. And when I interviewed him, his approach to claims is I'm trying to get customers for life, right? That's in terms of like what we do, it's not like a lot of people are focused on like it's just reducing costs and just bringing out outcomes. He's like, if we provide exceptional service and we engage, then if there's a difference at renewal, and we know for personal lines policies, it's like the difference of a dinner, like in terms of one policy, like $100. People will be like, oh, I'm going to get the cheapest insurance possible. But like if they file a claim and they did everything right by you, they're like, I'm not going to switch. It's like they did right and they provided me exceptional service, right? So
Yes. Okay, so I know we're running out of time, but I'm going to say one last thing. Um, so I can have the last word. You are absolutely right, because I talk to my students about that too. And I say, look, I have an insurance company, I won't name them, but they're expensive. They are real expensive. But I like them, A, because they treat their adjusters well. And I'm all about, if you treat your adjusters well, I'm going to love you. And then B, they bend over backwards for you, and as a policyholder, as me as a policyholder. And so I'm like, yeah, you probably cost 2 times as much as someone else. But yeah, there you go. Luis, how can people find you and your product, or get connected with you?
yeah, I mean well, first like if it's Google, like it's like if you Google Luis Diaz Guidewire, it's the company I was at in the past, I'll pop up because my name is about the equivalent of John Smith in Spanish. But the other part is if you just go to gobeyondroadmap.com, that's the company. Beyond Roadmap, Go Beyond Roadmap. We're going to be launching the website soon. I was hoping to have it before the podcast. For claimmentor.com is coming up, but that's what the name of the product is. But yeah, you can also just look at me, Bill and Chantal's like LinkedIn. I'm there connected, but right on the website of Go Beyond Roadmap, what I'm really trying to do is just like, please sign up for an appointment, like, and just if it's, you only got 30 minutes, we'll have a 30-minute discussion, and we could just talk about the importance of claimant interviews. And very easy to reach. You could find me on LinkedIn. But yeah, Go Beyond Roadmap, set an appointment. And if you're interested in a pilot program of using this service, then let's talk. But we talked about listening. If you want to just get on a meeting with me and be like, Luis, you're completely wrong. I don't think this is going to work at all. Like, I think what you're approaching is like, you are just barking up the wrong tree. I especially want to talk to you, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the
No, you know what? I totally agree with you. And again, I feel like I'm dominating the conversation, but we're talking about what plaintiff attorneys, policyholder attorneys versus defense attorneys will do. When I got to be an expert witness, being hired by the plaintiff's bar, I've learned a lot, of how they see things, and that, changes our bias or whatever. And I often encourage everybody to read the other side's viewpoints so that we can go, oh, you know what, they're right. Or, yeah, no, I'm still right, or whatever. So I can totally see that point. I love it. Love it.
It's great. Yeah. Always fighting the confirmation bias, right? That's in product management and software, we always say that if you're too myopic on a particular view, then you're not seeing the big picture. And one of the biggest things you have to challenge is like I have a hypothesis, but my hypothesis might be wrong, right? And I don't want to wait. If someone's going to, I don't want to waste a lot of money pursuing a product thing if nobody's going to buy it, right? So, but I think I've gotten really good reception, but I want to hear from everybody, right? In terms of if you're passionate about AI and passionate about claims and automation, then let's set up a little conversation. But this has been so great. I was nervous coming into this. You're both fantastic hosts and hostesses. It's really great to be here. I hope that your listeners maybe learned something. But yeah, thank you so much for having me here.
I wore a tie today to calm your nerves.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah,
It's because Luis is a spicy adjuster.
That's right. That's right. Okay, Luis, thanks. Luis, thank you very
Luis.
much. Luis, thank you
Luis.
very much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And Chantal, what do we have on board for next week or next podcast?
I think we're doing like what is quote a motor vehicle, which sounds really kind of boring. But what I was thinking of is all of those cases that I hear about. They're actually lawsuits where it's like a pedestrian gets hit by a bicycle or a motor vehicle, what we would think of a car, and is that going to be underinsured motorist or uninsured motorist, or so it kind of goes into like what is a motor vehicle, and then how you get pedestrians all involved, and maybe a hit and run, or yeah, you know how we are, Bill. We'll just talk for 2 hours about nothing at all, and
Oh yeah, I
it's
could
amazing.
talk a long time about e-bikes and UTVs and ATVs.
And LMNOPs and SOBs and all of that. Well, Luis,
Great.
thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you, sir. And I look forward to carrying on more conversations with you.
I will make sure I wear a tie, and I said a top hat.
Does this mean
Top
I need to
hat
wear a
game.
tie now? I'm going to wear a
Yeah.
bow tie.
I love
Oh
it.
yeah,
I
that'd be
will wear a
awesome.
bow tie then.
And your top
Sweet.
hat.
And my top hat. Do not tempt me. I will do it. All right. See y'all later, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on the Art of Adjusting podcast, where we talk about life as an insurance adjuster.
If you enjoyed this podcast or this episode, please give us 5 stars and a review. It does help the algorithm pick us up.
Hit that subscribe button real quick and tell all of your adjuster friends to check this out as well. For independent adjusting services, go to www.autin.claims. And for anyone interested in working as an independent liability adjuster, go to the Contact Us tab to join our roster.
In the meantime, you can contact me at theartofadjusting.com for consulting and training purposes.